Do it.
We're live.
No one say anything.
We're going live.
We are live,
Well,
as far as I can tell. So
yeah, we're live. I mean, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mystic Moon Café and Radio with assortment of witchy guests. Should I say witchy? Is that a bad word?
No.
Oh.
It's not a bad word.
Okay. But, we got that nasty 20-second delay here, folks. So don't worry, we can edit things out. I'm joking. You'll be perfect.
You need that with me around.
No, I think we're live.
Yeah, we are.
No swearing.
We're, as far as I know, we are not covered by the FCC yet.
Oh, good.
So we're
east.
good.
You guys are based East Coast, right? So technically, it's late enough.
That's true.
Even for cable.
Even for cable.
Yes, our server is somewhere in Guinea-Bissau, so it's even later, and we're better than later than that.
Perfect.
And we're outside the bounds of the FCC because it's Guinea-Bissau.
Okay, yeah, sounds like a fabulous place to travel for.
I hear there's a beach.
Vacation. Oh, okay.
Just one?
I think the whole coast is a beach. It's a coast.
Fair enough.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Jake. All righty. Well, here we are, Mystic Moon Café Radio. Well, Viva basically now, but I have a marvelous assortment of witches and shaman and magical workers all the way around me here. I'm going to let everybody go through. I don't care who starts, but introduce yourself and tell us, maybe what traditions you follow or that type of thing.
Oh, you should call on us because otherwise we won't know who to go next.
Okay. All righty. Patricia, you want to go
Hollywood
first?
Squares.
What was that last thing, Wendy?
Patricia, would you like to go first?
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't hear my name.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, I'm Patricia Gardner. I'm the High Priestess of the Dragon Warriors of Isis. I've been a practitioner for 58 years. My specialty is getting rid of negative. I teach. I've co-authored 3 books. I've been on the Discovery Channel, and I've been in 2 movies, and I've been on lots of radio shows. That's about it.
Okay.
That's great.
Wonderful. Lauren, would you like to go next?
Sure. I own New Moon Books, Crystals and Candles. I've been practicing witch and ceremonial magician for longer than I'd like to say, since I was in my teens and my 50s now. And consider myself a witch and a ceremonial magician, which I hope is one of the topics tonight I get to discuss with my colleagues, witches, and what is the definition of a witch. So I can't wait to get into the meat. That's enough about me.
Okay. Jennifer?
Oh,
sorry.
Sure. I'm Jennifer Page. I have been practicing for about 35 years now. I've never really gravitated towards labels, but lately it's funneling down to eclectic green witch with a focus on divination and healing work.
Very nice. Madison, would you like to go?
I'm going to be the odd person out here, and I am not a traditional practicing witch by any definition. I'm actually an anthropology and sociology degree holder, and I am also a paranormal investigator that I've started to learn a lot about all the different aspects of religions and traditions from around the world and how they correlate with the paranormal and how we interpret that. So I'm a little bit of the odd duck in the group, but I'm happy to be here.
And welcome.
That's awesome.
Devin, would you like to go? Sorry.
Sure. So my name is Devin Hunter. I'm an author. I have a couple of books out, a book series, and then another book that just dropped a couple of months ago called Modern Witch. It's a pictorial spell guide. It's pretty cool. You should check it out. I actually have, I'm in charge of two traditions that I run, Black Rose, which is a tradition of witchcraft that I founded with my partners and I. And then I have my own very eclectic group. We go off and do our own thing called Sacred Fires. That's a tradition I started. I've got initiations and a handful of other things we can talk about. But mostly I like to think of myself as just Modern Witch. I am the founder of Modern Witch magazine, podcast, all that good stuff, modernwitch.com. You can check it all out there. But yeah, I recommend checking out Modern Witch, and you can figure out if you all the good stuff about me if you're interested in more.
Temperance, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Temperance Alden. I'm the author of Year of the Witch. I also run the Instagram page, Baldwin and Witchcraft, and TikTok and Twitter. I also run the Joke Coven, McCormick Coven tradition on the internet.
Did everybody lose sound?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Well, welcome. Sonia?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Sonia, and I'm helping Wendy co-host. I don't know how how much wrangling I have to do, but hey, I have been a practicing witch now for 15 years. I practice a Wiccan tradition primarily, but I also a practicing shaman, so I do a lot of shamanic work as well. I'm an energy healer. I'm in a pagan band called Chronolus. We recently won Band of the Year from IPMA, and so that was pretty cool. I'm trying to think what else I'm in and do and practice in. That's kind of it. I'm a nurse during the day and an energy healer at night. And a practicing witch. So that's a little bit about me, and I was just really excited to pop in and help Wendy out with some of the questions, because I love the very backgrounds. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure. All right. Excuse me. I've got the allergy sinus cough, so I'm trying to suppress. All right. Shall we start with a definition of a witch? What each of you considers a witch to be, and maybe some of the differences with shamanism even. Patricia, would you want to start?
Okay. Well, to me, the definition of a witch is someone who doesn't perform magic but is magic. Someone who is attuned with the earth, with the seasons, with the cycles. Someone who reveres Mother Earth and the creatures that live on it. That's pretty much what I think.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And now Patricia's book, Wicca, What's the Real Deal? I've read it. It's a great book. Everybody should go out and buy a copy.
Yeah, it is a pretty good book. It teaches not only people who are interested in learning, but it teaches their family and the outside world the difference between who we are and who they think we are, which is totally different than who we really are. So this book, that's why we wrote the book, because people ask us a lot of questions. And some of them are really foolish, like, why aren't you green? Do you fly on birds? Do you eat babies? You know?
Only on Thursday.
That's why we wrote that first book. We wanted to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a couple of questions in the chat, and I don't know if we want to handle them as we go or kind of wait for a break in questions. What would you all like to do?
Why don't we all get a definition of witchin, and that way you can accumulate more questions and we can go from there.
True.
Okay, so I'll just interject once we get through our round robin definition, because I'm busy dropping everyone's books into the chat.
Okay.
So,
Oh, great.
okay.
Thank you, Jake. Oh, sorry. Okay, Lauren, were you finished with that, or did you have more to put in?
I could give my definition of what I believe a witch is. It's next to impossible to give one specific definition of witch because it's multicultural, it's different in every culture. But my interpersonal experience as a witch is working with energy. I believe that it has to do with being aware of your subconscious and being aware of changing the infrastructure of your subconscious in order to change the infrastructure of your environment. And also in a more simple fashion, being able to work with energy and manipulate energy, because a witch is one who works magic. So the real definition is, what is magic? And to me, the definition of magic is, and I'm talking about magic as, in a post-enlightenment society, magic ending with a K rather than a C. So it's not magic as far as, a sleight of hand or a man pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It's magic ending in a K. It's spiritual. It's about self-improvement. It's about how do we use the energy to better ourselves, create evolution, and yes, connect ourselves to the elements and to Mother Earth, but also create a better person within ourselves, and we can help others as well. So it's about channeling energy. And I talk about this in one of my books, Dragon Flame, which brings up my own magical philosophy, which is goal, purpose, and sacrifice, which is necessary in order to make magic work. And everyone has a different idea about what is necessary, what is not necessary. Again, that's the beauty of witchcraft and magic, is that it is interpersonal. And in Dragon Flame, I discuss high magic as well as Wicca, or what is called low magic, or natural magic. And I discuss that you need to have a goal to start. Where do you start? You have to have some kind of desire. When you have a desire, it starts this swirling action, an action within ourselves that starts to bring energy into us, and we're able to visualize what we want. So my definition of a witch is not simple. It's slightly complex because it needs to be, but in summary, it's drawing down the energy and being able to work with energy. And once you're able to work with that energy, then you're able to begin spell work and work with the energies to focus on a specific intent. And I talk about that in my most recent publication, Horse Magic, which I talked about on your show before, Wendy, with Sonia. And I also talk about it in my electronic magazine that I founded called The Familiar. And The Familiar is a free online resource, and you can reach it at newmanbooks.org. And it has a lot of different authors, and including, we just did a review on Temperance Alden's Year of the Witch, best-selling book. Congratulations. And Devin, your book is amazing. All of your books, we have them in my store, another bestseller. So I don't want to hog the screen, but that's my definition. I could go on and on and on, but I want to hear everyone else's.
I already love this conversation so much. Basking in it.
Next, Jennifer.
Oh, sure. Just building off of what Patricia and Lauren said, to me, being what is a witch, I believe it's that connection that we discover within ourselves. And it goes deeper than just connecting. It's realizing what we are. Not only do we connect with nature, we are nature. Not only do we connect with the universe, we are the universe. And having that awareness and that action of manifesting, what that means, is just pure magic. It's really how I feel about it. And it's a continuous exploration of finding your higher self and where you fit in. And when I say fit in, it's more of you're an individual expression of the universe, right? And there's a beauty in that. And this world can be so loud with its input and what we have to worry about and think about every day that it's hard to find that quiet connection within. And we often look outside for that confirmation. You know, what makes you a witch? You got to tick these things off, outside confirmation, but really those answers are on the inside, and it's different for everyone, as mentioned. And no one's going to tap you on the shoulder. You're just going to know. And it's about self-validation and finding your place as you're actualized in the universe. And like I said, I think it's magic.
Absolutely.
Madison, do you want to turn, or what do you think?
So just from the historical side of things, the term witch wasn't necessarily used when different tribes and nations were coming up with their ideas of religion or belief practices, or that naming of the energy that's out there. And so a lot of times witch was used as the term to negatively label somebody as someone who's going against the norm and is being outside of the mainstream religion. Mm-hmm. And as of late, it's gone through this renaissance of people recognizing, it was probably even the spiritualist movement, you could say, spurred some of that inclination, but it was also in the 50s and 60s as you're starting to look towards love and peace after the wars. And there was just this revolution of people recognizing that a lot of us are repressed and we are put down because we are not part of the mainstream. We are not the quote unquote big man on campus. We're not the ideal of what it means to be a person. And so whether it was women or different ethnic minorities or going to your basic religions that your ancestors grew up with, it was a renaissance of those beliefs and bringing those back into the public, and now wearing the label witch is something to be proud of. So it's just really cool to see that develop from something that was really negative and something that would have possibly had you killed even within the last few centuries.
Right.
So it's really fascinating just seeing how everyone's definition differs, but it's all based on this empowerment and connection with others and with greater energies outside yourself.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Devin, would you have a go?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has spoken a piece of this mystery here, because I'm listening to like what Lauren was saying, and I think it is this thing that's way more complicated. And then, as Madison was just saying, if we were to look at history, we would see that people have a different relationship to this idea of what a witch is and what a witch was. And so for me, when we say what is a witch, I say it's anybody who practices witchcraft. If we ask what witchcraft is, I think that changes in any given decade, especially over the last 70 years. And so, for me, I think it's a really important thing to highlight this idea that for the most part, when we think of witchcraft outside of a ceremonial magic kind of setting, because ceremonial magicians, especially, back in the day, they were mostly wealthy people who didn't have to work in the same way, and life was different for them. They were more privileged in ways that we'll say the common folk weren't. And so for me, when I typically think of witchcraft, I do think of that low magic. I think of that stuff that was around that people were turning to in order to make life equal, because they felt that, the odds were stacked against them. And whether that was from a physical health standpoint, you're a woman and you couldn't get an abortion, or it was something more serious like my neighbor's screwing my husband and I have to take care of this, whatever. We may look at that stuff now and go, oh, you would never bother yourself with that. But that was real life stuff. If your partner was cheating on you, that was your wealth. That was your livelihood, especially as a woman, So I think if we look at it and what witchcraft has become, especially in my work with Modern Witch, really defining this, I just think has become like a never-ending goose chase, because I don't think we're ever going to. And that's because of, as Lauren was saying, different cultures use that term differently. And when we translate the word into English, English is a really messy language. And so a lot of people just get chucked in the witch bin, who would be offended by that, you know, that term, because it is translated back in their language differently. And so I think what we're really dealing with here is a witch, like I said, is anybody who's practicing witchcraft, and that is going to look different for everybody, especially nowadays. But we can look and see marked changes in that evolution, and I'm sure Madison, you know, can speak to this. We can see market evolutions, especially around war. So at the end of a war, we get this plume of kind of occultism that happens, and that's the beautiful stuff to study and to understand how we got here. But ultimately, one thing that I tend to say a lot is this is a discussion that every generation continues to have. And so magic warps and changes. And, you know, if we look at folk practices here in the States, there's a lot of Christian nuance and Catholicism, but that isn't necessarily very different from what you're saying over in the UK and in parts of Eastern Europe. And so, you know, there's still Bible verses, and they're still talking to the saints. And no, that's, you know, there's less that separates us than there tends to be, that we think there is. And so I think if we're just talking about magical people, and I am going to have a caveat to the magic with a K, and that is that not being I've studied ceremonial magic. I would love to continue that study in my future, but I grew up with stories of magic with the sea. I grew up with stories of Peter Pan, and I grew up with stories of fairies in the woods, and and those were the things that made me want to go figure out my life, and that brought me to the world I am today. So as much as I understand, we have this especially, you know, in the 60s and the 70s, trying to separate the stage magician from the magical practitioner. For me, like, those people are obviously their own thing. For me, when I say magic, it's magic with a C, because I'm part of that. I'm the modern representation, as all witches are, of the magic that we've been writing about and witnessing for thousands of years. And so I personally embrace that because of the way magic works in our language as a word. But I totally appreciate the magic with a K thing, and I have nothing against it, but I'm just a proponent for magic with a C. That's all. So I will shut up and pass it on now.
Excellent job. Temperance, how about you?
I have internet issues, so
Oh.
I'm just gonna like go off video, because I think that I'll be able to do this if I'm off video. I just don't think I can do them both at the same time.
Okay.
I think, you know, we get a little myopic with the word witch, to be honest. I think that a witch is only someone who identifies as one, and that's it. I don't think that there's a quota of what makes a witch or what doesn't make a witch. A witch is someone who stands in their power and identifies as one, and as long as you're identifying as one, you are one. That's it. There's no, you know, blood quota to be it. There's no hereditary lineage that's necessary. There's no way that you can prove to someone else that you are a witch.
Okay. Temperance, are you
like we
done, or
got
did
We
we
internet
lose
lost
you?
you, Temperance.
I think we lost her again.
I think we did too. Darn it.
And I liked what she was saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Come back. Come back.
There's different ways of defining witch and thinking about the word witch, and
Mm-hmm.
witch can be used in a couple formats. You know, really, the word witch, just like any other words, we have to be very careful because they can be very personally charged with feelings, and witch can be a word that is used right now in the 21st century as a marker for someone that is empowered. It could be a feminist word, you know, and this has a lot to do. And Madison, I'm sure that you can, you know, help with where I'm leading with this. I mean, it's different than someone that is utilizing magic and working with as a magical practitioner and with energies. If you say that you're a witch and you identify as a witch, then you are a witch, and I agree. But it holds a different context than it does than someone that's actually practicing in a magical realm or in the magical field. The 21st century has changed a lot of that, as I like to call it, the post-enlightenment society now. So it's it is the word that leads to feminism and empowerment, and also other minorities, not just women, but LGBTQAI and BIP. I mean, it's just broadened this entire spectrum, and it's broadened it because of our ability to reach so many people, especially through social media. So, what is the difference then between witch as a power word and witch as the definition? And I think that if Temperance comes back on and we can hear what she has to say.
I am here, but I missed a chunk of that because I had to flip from my computer to my cell phone, because that's just the way my night's going. So why not? But I think that there is a difference between witch title and witch as a power word. Because when we talk witch as a title, anyone can self-title, right? We can all just say, hey, I am identifying as a witch, and that's that. And there's a difference between someone who's identifying as a witch and someone who not only identifies as that, but feels that practices that is called to that path. So I think it gets really difficult in conversation, because we can't just look inside someone else, like inside their soul or inside whatever, and see like, hey, like this person is what they say they are. It's really difficult. Someone has to take the time to get to know you, and work with you. And, I think for each person, it's going to look different. But for one person, like, even though my page on the internet and I'm well known as a witch and I've written about witchcraft, I don't prefer to be called a witch. I prefer to be called a practitioner. So I think for each person, it's just an evolving, one person might identify as a witch today, but in a year from now, they might not feel like that word fits anymore. So it's really a changing evolutionary word that means different things in different moments.
Great. Very well said.
I agree.
Sonia, did you want to add anything, or do we want to let Jake? I think there's 2 or 3 questions in the chat.
But Sonia, go for it if you haven't chimed
please.
in.
I ditto. Everything that I've heard, I think you guys, I think everyone did a fabulous job coming at it from different ways and finding, different perspectives on it. And I think that that's the beauty of it, is that there are so many different perspectives. And I think now more than ever, what we need and what we're exhibiting today is that respect and space that we hold for each other to have those definitions and be okay if we don't all agree, that this is my definition and I hold this, and out of respect, we're like, yeah, that's totally yours. You can hold that and identify that way, and that's yours to own. And, we're not going to take that from you and say, this is mine and it's better than yours. And I think that is the beauty in a lot of respects to this term and this path that many of us are walking. We don't have to walk in the same footsteps. We can walk it in our own journey, in our own personal way, and stand in our own personal power to say, this is how I define the word. This is how I choose to identify with that word, or a different version of it. Magic with a C, magic with a K. I don't identify as a witch. I identify as a practitioner. I do identify as a witch. All of that is just beautiful, and that we can do that. A lot of the traditional stuff that many of us grew up on, becoming, as baby witches, as we sort of grew up, there was a lot of tradition coming out of England in the sort of neo-pagan world to say, you must do it this way. It was very prescriptive. And I think so many of us have broken from that and said, you know what? I actually don't have to do it that way. But those that want to follow that, and that is the tradition that they value, to follow that path because it does have a lot to offer, that's beautiful and that's a wonderful thing. But so many people haven't. So many people have chosen to follow it, in their own independent way. For me, at least, I think Scott Cunningham, in my perspective, like really broke free from that in a very public way to say you can be solitary, as he called it, practitioner of witchcraft and do these things on your own. And that seemed to kind of stir things up a little bit, from that perspective, to say, what? You don't have to be initiated in by a coven? What's going on here? Wait, you don't have to be you don't have to follow the Wiccan path. You can be a witch without being Wiccan. What? You know, there was like this whole, you know, kind of emergence of people going, oh yeah, fundamentally, it's about your own personal connection to the energy and your intent and the earth and the moon and the sun and the stars, and how do you fit into that and how do you connect to that? And, you know, as many of you have said, you are a witch if you call yourself a witch, and that really is the basis of it. And for the most part, everybody, you know, kind of had consensus that it's about connecting with energy, manipulating energy, not to use that word in a negative way, but working with energies, you know, that really that is what seems to at least bind us all to that commonality of the term. And then, you know, as I'd mentioned early, I practice shamanism, and that brings up another term. I'm a white chick from the USA. So I was not born into shamanism. It was not handed to me from one shaman to another necessarily in that respect. I had a shaman that, you know, identified me as a shaman, but from, you know, the cultural perspective of things, you know, I choose to say that I'm a shamanic practitioner. I practice the craft and the art of shamanism, not that I was born into this and there wasn't a tribe that, you know, determined that that's who I was and what I did. And who knows, in past lives, you know, that may have been my path, but it's not in this one. And therefore, out of respect, I choose to use a different term. That's just how I identify, as a practitioner versus a shaman. And so for me, it kind of has that same sort of connection and connotation to say, I do call myself a witch, you know, and that is what I identify with. And that's what I'm comfortable with. So yeah, so just tying it all together. I agree. Yes, concur. It's fabulous.
Me as well. You know, I'm more of a student than anything else. That's kind of why I had Madison here with me too. We study all of the different things and look at it from kind of not necessarily the outside looking in, but just different perspectives, like you said. All righty, Jake, your turn.
Okay, let's go to the questions. We have the first question is directed to our guest, Devin Hunter, and it's from, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. It's either Sierra or Ciara. So this is your question. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here. So Devin, could we learn some more about the two traditions you mentioned? You practiced Black Rose and the other one. Could we have a summary of those?
Yeah. So Sacred Fire came first. I am one of those people who, when I was a young witch, when I was a new witch, I thought that I had to go get some validation from a tradition in order to be a real witch. And so I went on the track that a lot of new witches go to, which is looking for teachers and then studying with a couple of different traditions. And I would find myself studying, like I studied Wicca, traditional Wicca, and I became a 3rd degree high priest in that tradition. And at the end of the day, it wasn't for me. I'm a queer person, and there was a lot of issues there for what how the tradition was presented to me at the time. I've met some really great Wiccans who told me that I was educated the wrong way, which is great. So I'm not, there's no play on Wicca, but for me at the time, with who my teacher was, that wasn't a good place for me, and so I left. And then I found myself studying what is referred to as Dianic witchcraft, which has nothing to do with the Budapest. That has been around just actually longer, but we'll get into that. It's a whole other thing. With a really cool crystal shaman in the woods in Ohio. And so, you know, we had a little study group. And so I became a 3rd degree in that tradition. And then, you know, I went off to go explore things and disconnected just because I traveled and wasn't living in the same place anymore. And so I found myself studying the fairy tradition of witchcraft out here in California, and fell in love with it and found a lot of things. And while that was happening, I was getting a call to go do other things spiritually as well. So I kind of put my fairy stuff on hold for a while and started teaching this class. I've been teaching for a very long time. And so I started teaching this class out here in California called The People's Witchcraft. And it was all about the goddess Aradia and tapping into the goddess Diana and Lucifer as described in the book of Aradia. And at the end of the year, people were like, well, what do we do now? We want to stay and keep doing something. And so we said, okay, and we did. And thus Sacred Fires was born. And as time went on, sacred fires became very specialized in certain magics, certain things, certain mysteries. We ended up having a set of spirits kind of present themselves to us that we feel we're responsible for. And I write about this stuff in my Witch Power series, the Witch's Book of Power, the Witch's Book of Spirits, and the Witch's Book of Mysteries. I talk about all of this because I think it's important also as witches to talk about our processes and how things come to us, and kind of normalize the weird of being weird. And so I do my best to do that throughout my book series. And so that's how Sacred Fires was formed. And we kind of realized that if I was going to take somebody on as a Sacred Fires person, I really needed them to be at a intermediate advanced kind of place with their practice. Just because I'm a psychic medium. My practice is rooted in psychic mediumship. I was a psychic before I knew I was a witch. And I was doing stuff professionally as a psychic before I was even public as a witch. So my practice is really rooted in a lot of parapsychology, and just kind of looking at things from a different perspective than what we're usually kind of given in the craft. So when it came to Sacred Fires, things were really specialized, and we were focusing on very specific things. And I realized not everybody was a match for it. And it wasn't from a gatekeeping snobbery kind of way. It's just like, we have some intense stuff that we do, and we have a need for people to show up in a certain way. And that isn't always, what people can provide at the time. So while that was happening, my partner is also teaching a tradition, because we're all magical people living in this house. We're all professional authors and such. And he was running into the same problem where it was like, I would love to go deeper with people, but I keep getting, people who need like a year in the oven, people, or 2 years in the oven before we can really get into the stuff. So we ended up sitting down and kind of creating Black Rose out of this need to have a foundation for people who wanted to study witchcraft and maybe necessarily have like a good structure set up for them that maybe they wouldn't get otherwise, and approach it from multiple angles all at once. And so thus Black Rose was born. So Black Rose is a tradition everybody can join. I mean, we don't have rules necessarily about that. You can make it through, and once you make it through, then kind of the door opens up and you have options about how to study further and what to do with that. And we also tell people, give it a shot. I mean, you can sign up at blackrosewitchcraft.com or themysticdreamacademy.com. And when you're signing out, just use code Magister, MAGISTER, and you get the first month free. So you can dip your toes before you jump in. I think that's super important when you're studying witchcraft. So you can get a month and figure out what 4 lessons feels like before you go to take on all 50 something of them. So, we're really chill. We're really laid back. We're definitely California witches. So, it's about your journey. It's about where you need, and that's what we tried to provide it with Black Rose. But it's a separate thing from Sacred Fires. And we just actually recently, within the last 9 months, officially closed the door to accepting new people into Sacred Fires for now, because we need to incubate for a while. We need to, kind of just process and mature. And I think that's really good for a spiritual group to do from time to time. So that's where we're at, and that's what that's about. But if you want to know about Black Rose, just check out themysticdreamacademy.com, and all the information's on there.
Okay, I dropped the link to Black Rose Witchcraft in it, so I'll go hunt down the other link. So I need a fact check, guys, because this isn't my world. I am a technical ghost hunter, so I've been dropping links for the audience to follow. And Devin, I noticed you were saying things like, and I'm going to mispronounce, and I apologize, like Dianic Witchcraft and Fairy Witchcraft.
Dianic Witchcraft, yeah. So
okay.
Dianic, like the goddess Diana. So Dianic Witchcraft is centralized to the goddess Diana. And yeah, so you can Google that. Most things are going to conflate it with Dianic Wicca, which is the Budapest stuff. And so
okay, those were the links I was dropping because that's what I could find online. I'm like, should I use Witchcraft or should I use Wicca? Because the search engine only brings up the Wicca, not the witch.
You can look up if for those of you who are super nerds, if you want to look up, I can say certain things about it, certain things I can't say, but I can say just look up McFarlane Dianic, and you can find all kinds of information about us. Well, we're actually pretty secretive, but you can find out about us that way. But again, that's not a tradition I'm even practicing so much anymore. But if you're interested, you should go do it. It's really badass. If I can say that word. But yeah, it's a great, wonderful tradition to set.
Yeah, I think we cleared that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Swearing. I was like, oh God.
Just wait, we got a 20-second delay. So I'll just go beep, and it'll just overlay, and we'll be good. We'll be good.
So that might be actually Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it might actually be a good topic to discuss too, is Wicca versus witchcraft, because that does come up, and not, I mean, we can do questions, totally do questions, but I think that might be a good thing to talk about too, because that definitely needs,
I would agree with that
around it.
because we do have questions coming in from like rookie folks. These are the questions I'm asking from them, and if I'm confused between Wicca and witchcraft, I'm sure they are too.
Oh, sure.
And I've got a big old book on the occult too. Okay. So next question is from Brenda. I'm going to do a little paraphrasing here. She states that she's beginning her journey essentially, and she's looking to learn more. She's drawn to being a green witch, and looking for a little guidance about choosing a path. So she does have a follow-up question. She didn't ask this, I would, and she's asking about, she's studying holistic tarot now, and she plans to move into runes at a later point. But if we could step back and talk about when it comes to choosing a path, and though she's drawn to green witchcraft, how does one find that path?
I think that it's very important to, and this is a question I hear all the time, where do you start? And people are looking for recommendations on where to start, what book, what do you read, what do you do? And when thinking about, I'm drawn to this, I think that's the voice you should listen to. What are your passions? I mean, it's so broad of a topic. You could be lost and overwhelmed forever. So why not start with what speaks to your heart? Start quiet, start within you. What do you want to, what pops in your mind and your heart first? And research that, explore that. If it doesn't resonate how you thought it did, well, what's next? That sort of thing. Being drawn to green witchcraft myself, I am drawn to green because I absolutely resonate with nature, working with herbs, working with plants, anything nature-based. That to me includes crystals and the frequencies they provide, all the elements, earth, air, fire, water. And I include the moon. I know there's a lot of astrological witches who, focus on lunar energy and stuff, but I include the moon as a green witch. And I just think that, follow your passions, because your passion is what you're going to be good at. And don't let external forces define what you should be doing. It is a very personal path. So why not start with what your heart wants to do? So that's my input there.
And I think Devin talked about earlier when he kind of discussed his path. I mean, and it's true for many of us. He started in one place, learned a ton there, and then we evolve. Many times we start in one area and something from that leapfrogs us to something else, or we find that we've gotten what we can from that and we're ready to move to something else. And, so many times you sort of leapfrog. So there's really no wrong answer for where to start. That may not be where you finish, and that's okay. You're going to learn along the way. So yeah, that's
absolutely.
It's a magic is a path of evolution. It's a path of finding.
I tell my students that it's a smorgasbord because there's so many different aspects of magic, which is why we're eclectic, because I don't want to pigeonhole their quest for knowledge. So I want them to learn all aspects.
And you're never done.
No, yeah, you can't. You're never done. I agree with everybody. I have a different spiel about it though, which is that I think you need to, especially if you're new and you're starting fresh and you're trying to figure out where to go, I think it's really important that you pick out 3 things that you want for yourself in your life. Like when you're talking long-term down the road, 10, 20, 15, 35, whatever years, with you, that as far back as, or far in the future as you can think, how do you want your life to be? What are you trying to build for yourself? What do you want to, leave as a legacy? Just think about those things. And the gloriousness of witchcraft, because there are so many avenues and there are so many different possibilities, is that you can find a way through that. What we tend to do, and what I know was my story and tends to be a similar story that I talk to with people who, especially people who practice for a while and then burn out, and then keep doing this over and over again, where they get really jazzed up and then burn out and stall, and get really jazzed up and burn out and stall, is that we tend to make allegiances because we're given certain examples in culture through other religions, especially if you're coming from an Abrahamic background, where you have to devote yourself to a tradition because that's what we think. We have to throw ourselves completely into a way of thinking about a god or a certain thing in order for all of this to work. And that's not how it works. And so if you go into it and you say, I'm going to be most importantly responsible to myself and for myself, and I'm going to make sure that my standards are met. I have a big thing in my books about ethics are relative to the situation. And that's like an old school witch answer, but that's a whole thing in itself. But your standards should be always met. Like I have certain standards about what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. That's a personal choice. I'm not going to, project that onto another witch. So, because at the end, as we've all said, this is such a personal choice. It's such a personal path. And we all have different thumbprints, and all of our witchcraft is just like that. So we're all different. But if you know who you are and you know what you want for yourself in your life, then the witchcraft has this beautiful way of opening up a path towards that. And if you're following the path of least resistance, then your magic will manifest. The things that you want for yourself will manifest, as long as you're in that nurturing place where you're being fed and you're feeding the world back. This is kind of back and forth that we do. And that's not like in a high vibrational sense. You don't have to be a good person and put a bunch of good stuff out there to get your stuff to work. I wish it was like that, because the world would be a very different place, wouldn't it? But no, so I think we're in this place where, because you can be anything when it comes to being a witch, you should figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And then let witchcraft help you do that. I'm a big proponent that we are on the island of misfit toys, and I worship the goddess of the island of misfit toys, and it's okay to be weird, and it's okay to have all those things, and it's okay to get a little lost and to come back on your path. That's what the whole journey is for. But figure out who you are, what you want to be when you grow up, and then let magic do that.
I agree with you, Devin. I also think that if you don't know who you are, if you don't know where to start, and this is where the question began, is you're not sure what you want to do, what path do you take? Instead of trying to belong to some kind of metaphysical cul-de-sac, it's about being eclectic and finding what's best for you. It doesn't come overnight. Ask for it to come to you in a dream. Light a candle to an angel, to a deity. It doesn't matter what pantheon, Egyptian, Greek, and ask for a message to come to you, because who you are and what you're trying to achieve right now may completely change in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. So leave your heart and mind open, see what comes to you. I don't believe there's only one place to start, but you have to start somewhere. And I like, Jennifer, you said start with your passion. That's wonderful. Start with your passion. And again, I can only speak from my own experience, and my experience was starting with what I found interesting, having a mentor and experiencing and exploring the occult. And I still keep changing. My philosophy changes all the time. Sometimes overnight, sometimes within 10 years. I know that over the past 35 years, that my philosophy has changed. I've seen it morph at least 2 or 3 times, and it's changed from different paths of spirituality and different deities and different pantheons. So that's the wonder of being a magical practitioner. And if you're interested in green witchery, I know Tempered Zero Gear of the Witch has an amazing place for her to start.
Yeah, I think, well, I was gonna cut in, but it's like, I think for anyone starting with green witchcraft, even though my book, I think there's a common misconception that when you are a green witch, you're also pagan, and green witch is not synonymous with earth-based pagan. You can believe a lot of different things and practice green witchcraft without being an earth-based pagan. So that's like the first step on that door of green witchcraft, is like, how involved am I with the earth? And then the second step, before you read any witchcraft related material on green witchcraft, is to actually read like botany books, gardening books, local plant books, figure out what's going on in your local ecosystem. And if you're still interested after learning all of that, like learning about your climate, learning about the plants that can grow and not grow, because so many people start green witchcraft and then they try and grow plants that are like super specific to England, and they're living in Arizona and they're wondering like, why are my plants not growing? That's exactly why your plants aren't growing. So just because, you know, you want to do it doesn't necessarily mean you can do it. I think that's the first place to start. So if you say like, okay, I'm interested in green witchcraft, go for it. Like there's nothing stopping you from trying it and then being like, oh, this isn't the right fit, let me try something else. But if that's where you feel like you want to start there. Check out like literal science books, see, is this still what I want to do? And then start getting into the witchcraft books. Like my book, Year of the Witch, is based on intuitive magic. And I don't necessarily call it green witchcraft, but it is actually very green. It's based on earth-based paganism. So, and then there's, you know, there's the other books on the market, like Green Witch is out there. There's a book called Green Witchcraft. There's Cunningham's Magical Herbs. There's like a ton of books that you could like explore within that genre.
Green Witchcraft and Mora is another great author that you can start with. And also some of the lesser known books are books that are written by academics. There is Dr. Nicola Bown, B-O-W-N. She is a teacher of literature and art at the University of London. She is really one of the only academics that really talks about Victorian era spirituality and fairies. And her books are just amazing. They're phenomenal if you want something that is filled with facts and not so many opinions. That's a great place to start. There's also Diane Purkis, I believe, is another wonderful, she's a lecturer at University of Reading. She wrote an amazing book about the history of witches. There's another place to start. And Temperance, who were we talking about the other day? There is it Ronald? What is
Ronald Hutton? He's an academic. He doesn't write on green witchcraft, but he writes about the history of paganism and witchcraft in Britain.
So there's a lot of academics that write about, in a more factual manner, about spirituality and witches and the history of witches. So those are good places to start as well. Help you broaden your idea of what you're able to find under the category of witchcraft and spiritual paths.
Lauren, I was going to ask about your path, the Golden Dawn, Circle of the Golden Dawn. Is that right? Or
the Golden Dawn, it's not necessarily my path, it's one of my paths.
Okay.
So I just remember being fascinated by anything supernatural. I loved Bewitched. Anything with a witch in it, I loved. And really also, I am psychic, so having that natural ability, my first memories are, I thought, making my bed fly. It was really astral travel, and this is as a 4 or 5-year-old child. So I believe that anyone can be psychic, anyone can be a witch, anyone can be a practitioner of the arts. It is not limited or restricted. There are certain people that, and I liken it to, if you study the piano, it may come to you naturally, or you may play by ear, or you may be a child prodigy, or it may be very difficult for you and you have to put a lot of practice into it in order for it to work, and you just reach a certain plateau. And I find that so far, and through my own experiences and what I've witnessed, it seems to be the way that energy works and the way people have a connection with psychic ability, as well as spell work. I say spell work because it means, how do you make your magic manifest? So yeah, I grew up with religious parents who were also very open-minded, and they had shelves on the library wall. I remember it was Edgar Cayce, and it was all about the Sleeping Prophet and Nostradamus. And so I had access to even though they were religious parents, they were also very open-minded, and I had a lot of books at my disposal to feed my psychic ability and my natural curiosity. So my path started really just with curiosity, and it became more involved with Wicca, which I then realized just religion just did not work for me. It just didn't. It's for me, it was, I feel it's the most dangerous thing anyone can find is religion. That's my own personal opinion. But I threw away dogma and just started learning that what I experienced as a psychic through lucid dreams and through counseling people, I allowed that to lead the way. I mean, if there's any way that I can help stop the pain, I guess that's experienced from bungling with power. I've put that in my books to help people because I've experienced it when I was younger. And so yeah, I dropped out of formal Wicca and just started learning more about the Golden Dawn. And so I've been both in covens, both in the Golden Dawn, and for many, many decades. And it gives a great knowledge, and it teaches you how to, it taught me how to work properly with my natural ability and how to reach a certain trance state. And when you reach a certain trance state, that's when you're able to bring in the energies of the divine. And that's how that's how I am able, is able to manifest or create a spell. So for me, at that point, there was no path other than the one I was experiencing, which is that if you go into a natural trance state of, some would call it alpha state, where it's your quasi sleep, you know, half awake, half asleep. And in that trance state, you're able to come into contact with spirits, elementals, and trying to keep this simple, really draw down creative energy so that you become the creator of your reality. And as I'm growing older and as I'm experiencing more in my life, I do see that it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm a co-creator. I'm going to create anything I want. It just doesn't work that way. Devin brought up something interesting. It's the path of least resistance, and that is magic. Magic takes the path of least resistance, like pouring water down a hill. And you could read that in many magic books. They'll use that analogy because the water is going to take the easiest path. But as long as I was able to have control over my environment, which to me was the definition of power, then I started to create magic that helped me improve myself. And that's really the path. So learning from the Golden Dawn, learning the Kabbalah and the sacred knowledge and the divine names became the backbone of my path. But it's not necessarily high magic or ceremonial magic. It's not necessarily the way I was raised from a very little boy up until I was 15, which would have been called priorita, or really Italian-based witchcraft mixed with Catholic religion. Again, it's syncretic. So there's, for me, it's my own path. That's why I wrote Dragon Flame. It's my own path that created self-improvement. So yes, it's a mixture of Golden Dawn. It's a mixture of earth-based magic, and it's helping me become more of the person I want to be. And I'm interested now in disseminating knowledge, sacred knowledge, to people. And I see that it holds a true responsibility. And you know, how do we make magic modern and efficient? I think that the next generation is doing a great job at it. and we're headed in the correct direction. But yeah, there's something with the beauty of finding your own path. I mean, I don't know anyone else that walks my same path. I know people that have a common denominator, and that's what brings us together. So my path is basically driven at this point by astral experiences, lucid dreams, spontaneous or spiritual epiphanies. It's my higher self that guides me, and it was always there, but it took a long time for me to find it and really understand it and allow it to refine my energies.
All righty. Patricia, let's hear your story of how you went the way you went.
You mean when I started?
Well, I would like to hear more about the Warriors of Isis. That was kind of intriguing. But yeah, wherever you started, what made you decide I need something different?
Well, I was 8 years old.
Ooh.
And I know. I lived in an orphanage, and the goddess came to me one day, and that was just it. I've been with her ever since. That was 58 years ago.
That is so sweet.
That's fantastic.
She knew I needed someone, and she was there. And has been ever since.
Nice, very nice. Do you still have a big coven there, or
yeah?
I know you were with a group of ladies up there, but I wasn't sure if that was still around or not.
Well, no, that coven's not. That coven was together for like 25 years, and it got to the point where it was too much because we were doing so much. We were investigating. We were doing clearings. We were on TV. We were in the movie. We were doing the radio show, and it just a number of us got really burnt out. Plus, we wrote the 3 books, so we separated, and I waited a couple of years till I was myself again. You know, you get burned out after a while, and I said to the goddess, well, goddess, if I'm supposed to continue to teach and start another coven, send them. And 3 days later, my first new student came. And then a bunch more came. And now we have there are like 10 of us.
Good deal. I'm glad you're still in there and going, and sounds like it's going well.
We're still doing clearings too. We get calls all the time. We have one coming up in Ravenna. We don't do investigations a lot now. We mainly just do clearings.
Okay.
I know what's in there. I don't need to look at it. I just need to get rid of it.
Bring the family some peace of mind, and there you go.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of people that need people that can do that, and there's not a lot of people that can.
Right.
A lot of times, whenever we went and did an investigation, our students knew how to help before they got there. And they didn't know anything about the site before they got there because we didn't want any preconceived notions. So other than Dana and I, the team went in cold. So that whatever they got, we knew it was real. It wasn't something they heard. But they learned before they ever went on a site how to protect themselves and how to eliminate the problem. Because if you're only going in to investigate, all you're going to do is irritate the things. And when you leave, the family's going to pay the consequences. If you can't fix it, don't go.
I can, in my mind's eye, see Jake probably biting his tongue at this point, but I'm right there with you.
I will say, as a ghost hunter, I like the spirits to stick around, and it's even.
See, we don't. We want them, if they're positive spirits, we want them to continue their journey, so we cross them over. And if they're negative, we send them back where they came from.
Patricia, when you go in to help and do these clearings, do you ever educate the family on how to claim their own space and fill their homes with their own vibration and love, so that they create their own bubble that these things can't seep back into?
Absolutely. But we also seal the place before we leave, so they can't get back in.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah, I just feel like the education of, who is going to be more powerful than the person who claims that space on a daily basis and fills it with their own energy and love,
Absolutely. And once you show them there's nothing to be afraid of, because it's the fear that feeds the negative.
Yeah.
When you teach them not to be afraid, it makes it a lot easier for them to not let anything else back in.
Exactly. Because when we're afraid, we retreat, and it gives the entity or the energy more ground to claim as their own.
And they'll take it every chance they get.
Yes.
Indeed so.
I've been doing clearing since I was 14.
Wow.
That's a long time. I'll be 66 in February, so.
Amazing.
You
I frequently tell people that it's just like any other guest in your home. Would you allow
Tell them when to leave?
Yeah. Would you allow them to stick around and overstay their welcome? Would you let them walk through your house at 3 a.m, crashing things around and waking you up? Would you allow them into spaces you don't allow other guests in your home? It's up to you, the homeowner, to decide what is and is not permissible, and when their stay is done. Like, you have overstayed your welcome. Time to
Absolutely.
Are you psychically leaving your front door unlocked?
Right. Yeah. It's time to escort them out and say thanks for the visit, but you gotta go. Even if it's grandma, it's like, thanks for checking in, but you can't move in. We do not have a grandma pod or whatever they call them now on properties. So you don't
have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah, go visit one of the other grandkids for a while.
Or retire to the trailer park in Florida, but you got a GTFO.
You gotta
GTFO.
Yeah. Sure.
So I do have one final question from the audience. I want to make sure we get to it and everything. And this one's going to be a mashup between Chris and Chandler. And Chris was asking about, for new witches or people on the new path, and they may not know exactly what they're doing, and through their practices or carelessness, they harm someone, or they start down a black magic type path, because it's all cool on Supernatural and everything. But they may not know what they're getting in for, and advice there.
Learn before doing.
Yeah, and be self-aware. Are you just ego-driven? Are you thinking, wow, this is my ideal, that I'm projecting how amazing I will be if I do this dark magic? And it's like, and then again, it was mentioned before, like, where do you want to be? What is your purpose? Where do you want to end up? And if you're driven by just wanting the status or feeling cool or whatever it is, maybe take an honest look at what is driving you to feel that way. Are you feeling unsafe? Do you feel ungrounded? Do you feel like you have no support? And suddenly you need to backlash by feeling this amazing power or something. And it's like, really be honest with yourself and why and question your own motives about what you're doing and why you do it. And I've definitely talked to people who regret the choices that they've made, and they carry it around with them to this day. And it's like, what, move forward and change it, because sitting there with this regret isn't helping anything. It's just festering all the more. So, just be mindful of what you're doing and why. And if you do feel like you made the wrong choices, then figure out what atonement means to you and change. Don't just sit there with your chains of regret and self-deprecation. You know, that's not helping anyone. That's a double damage right there. So just be mindful of yourself, what it is you want to do. If you have regrets, fix it. And just continue to always be honest with yourself. And I think that in a way, you just can't go wrong in that area.
My students aren't allowed to do magic for the first year. They have to learn before they do.
I'd just like to interject on this. You know, most witches don't call it black magic. It's baneful magic. And baneful magic really actually takes a lot of energy to do and to raise. And beginners 9 out of 10 times, at least in my experience, don't have the capacity to do it. They may think they're doing it, but they're not actually. And I find that this question often comes before any magic has actually been done, before someone has done their first spell, and they're afraid of what the possibilities are and what might happen. And in those circumstances, I always recommend just like start really small, because the likelihood that something's going to go wrong and you're going to hurt someone is very, very slim. And then if you are talking about actually baneful magic, that you want to practice baneful magic, more than likely as a beginner, you won't have the ability to, you won't know how to raise that energy, you won't know how to make it work. And then that becomes another issue of morality, right? Do you morally believe that you can do that? Do you morally believe that you can influence someone that way? And those are all decisions that you have to make, because certain traditions will be like, no, baneful magic is completely off the table. And then other traditions are like, yeah, you can go ahead and do this. Like, that's your will. You can do whatever you want. So that there's like a mix of issues going on there. But just as the general question was, you know, basically like a beginner hurting someone, more often than not, it's not actually possible. There's other factors at play there that may be occurring, but beginners overall don't tend to have the ability or knowledge to perform successful baneful magic.
Just building on top of what Temperance said, I agree. And it's also important to analyze, where is this coming from psychologically? Where is your desire to harm someone or to perform baneful magic coming from? You know, there's nothing wrong with having a hearty hatred. I think it's healthy, but then you have to ask yourself, what is it? Why am I feeling this way? And luckily for the nearly 8 billion people that live on Mother Earth, working with energy takes a lot of just that work. So mostly it's subtle energies that you're putting out. You're still putting them out. It's intent, but just remember, whatever you put out is what you're going to be drawn to more and more. If you keep putting out energy to find a sexual fulfillment, that's what you're going to be attracted to more and more. If you keep putting out energy for harming people, you're going to be attracted to that more and more. Try to catch yourself and ask yourself why. I'm not saying that it's good, bad, or anywhere in between. It's your choice. But the energies are subtle, and when they go out, they still go out, subtle or not. So ask yourself, become your own psychoanalyst, and ask yourself why you're actually considering baneful magic. And thank you for correcting it. It's important to learn the correct lingo.
I would like to say that when I came to the craft, I was looking for power. I wasn't here to hug a tree or meet a goddess. Was not what I needed. I grew up in the armpit of Ohio, and there are, I talk about this a lot, 50% of my graduating class is either dead or in jail for meth. I looked around and I saw no options. I was told I didn't have any options. You're a hick from rural Ohio, get used to it, you're not going anywhere. There was a lot of odds stacked against me personally. And when I came to Witchcraft, it was because, yeah, I mean, I was psychic and I needed my answers. And that's my spiritual reason for coming to Witchcraft, but my non-spiritual reason for coming to Witchcraft, and I think we all have a non-spiritual reason for coming to any sort of spiritual path, was that I needed to get out of my crappy little town, and I needed to be able to survive when I was literally watching people I was growing up with not survive. So for me, witchcraft and that the way it presented itself was really here for about power, and it was about me finding resources. And initially I didn't realize that. Initially I thought I was gonna learn a spell to, you know, take care of this bully, or I was going to start doing this, you know, this type of work to make a lot of money. And, you know, and in the end of the day, what it really turned out to be was that I didn't realize what I wanted for myself. I didn't realize what I wanted to be when I grew up, so to speak. And so, you know, if you're looking at a problem and you're seeing, you know, that everything is coming up goth, which is fine. I'm Mr. Goth guy when it comes to witchcraft. I love my dark spooky noises and my bats and my Latin and rituals and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, that's still the color of which you present your magic does not include its intention, right? And it doesn't include its background for you. And so you really need to be, I think everybody serves themselves better as a witch when you can look at what's being presented to you, and you can really look at every single aspect of this. So if you want to curse somebody, well, why do you want to curse them? Like, is the issue really because they're an asshole, or is the issue because you're stuck and you can't move, right? Like, what's really going on? And 9 times out of 10, it is easier to move yourself through the playing board than it is to move other characters. And I think that's another thing witchcraft has taught me when we talk about the path of least resistance. So I don't think there's anything wrong coming to witchcraft for power and looking for a way to, you know, level your playing field. You don't have to come to witchcraft for spiritual reasons. I certainly didn't. I found my spiritual reasons for staying. I found spiritual satisfaction and evolution, but that wasn't what I came here for. And I don't think that that's a stipulation on the craft. Most witches that I know don't go hug trees and worship the goddess, even though I do, right? And that's okay. And a lot of practitioners don't stick around. Like, that's the other glorious thing about the craft, is that people who are on this panel here, we've dedicated, this is our lives. Like, we're not going anywhere. That's what we do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be your thing, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't come to witchcraft for a few years, get what you need, and then leave, because that's what magic can do. Magic can heal you, right? And so I think it's really important to know what you want out of a situation and to really think about that, because if it's to kick somebody out of your life, you can do that. That's fine. Like, you don't need any moral compass for that. But if it's because you're looking at the world around you and you're not happy with it, then there's other things to do besides slinging curses and baneful magic and things like that. There are other ways of taking care of that are way less energy. I mean, we talk about the time, like Temperance was talking about at the time. I'm thinking about the energy. Like, the energy of just putting all the energy into doing all of that crap is just so consuming. I mean, you do nothing else. You can do nothing else. And it just seems like when the world isn't as moving as fast as it is, and we have as much going on, it just seems like, as you were saying, there are better places to put your resources.
Right. Bless yourself and your loved ones. Don't hex someone you hate. Let it go. Move on.
I feel like maybe I misunderstood the question, because I understood the question to be like having them backfire their spells and accidentally harm someone. That's where I was coming from, was like, it takes a lot of power to do that. So you have to raise a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. So like, the chances of you doing a normal spell and having it hurt someone, very slim to none. Like, I thought that was the question.
No, I can totally see that too, because when you're just starting out, I can definitely see that cautionary tale, to a bit of a monkey's paw, right? Where, what if I do a spell for prosperity and a loved one dies and I get their benefits, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of that common fear when you're just starting out.
And, and you can totally do a weight loss spell and then get malaria. Like, that's, yeah. Sure. That's because again, magic follows the path of least resistance. So, yeah. It is better if you're doing, something like that. You should be like, okay, I'm going to do a weight loss spell, but I'm also going to join Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, and I'm going to put the
work
energy
with it.
Doing
yeah.
these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put real.
Yeah, I got the stomach flu when I did that.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so key, is you have to put actionable steps behind your magic. And I think that for new practitioners, new people following the path, is energy, where your attention goes, energy flows, as we've sort of been talking about. And if you focus on, weight loss as our example, you could get malaria, you could get the flu, you could end up broke and poor and starving and unable to feed yourself. There are a lot of ways to weight loss, not all pleasant. So,
and you don't always have.
Are important. You need to say not just weight loss, but lose all excess weight.
Correct.
And be a little more specific.
Yeah.
And be pragmatic. Don't just do the spell, but then take some action.
Take some steps.
There has to be
and
something
create
for
the
the magic to
space for it.
push.
Correct.
Right, but there has to be something for the magic to push, or else we're just we're trying to manifest something out of the ether, which you can do, but that takes a lot of energy. And so, as we're saying, speaking of energy, so you have to have something to push. Like, if you want the magic to manifest, what is it going to inoculate so that it can grow in this world? And if you're not, in the case of weight loss, if you're not doing so, like, if you don't have a plan for it, then your weight loss isn't, you're just going to spin your wheels, and maybe you might get sick, but chances are you're going to fall into the worst trap I think any witch can fall into, which is when you do magic or you do a spell and it's so unrealistic because you hadn't really thought about it and it really isn't planned, and then your magic falls flat. And then that reinforces what I refer to as the itty bitty shitty committee in the back of your head that tells you your magic doesn't work. And so Patricia was saying, you gotta plan for it. You gotta know what you're doing. This is absolutely, I think, a realistic expectation.
And Sonia,
I'm sure for the train. Yeah.
And Sonia, I'm sure you can relate also as a healer. It's just, you can't just throw out the healing energy for someone. They have to realize that they have ownership of, are you going to fix what you need healing for? There's not just this quick fix of throw this energy out there. You have to work with it. Because if you're going to continue to smoke, how am I going to heal your lungs? It doesn't work that way.
100%. It's 100%. And that's oftentimes the surprise for people when they come to me. And a lot of our session is not necessarily spent in me manipulating any kind of energy or chakra. A lot of it is spent in us talking about what it is going on in their lives, their minds, that is creating the blockage in the first place and holding them in that space. So they have to own their own shit. And, we have to talk about owning your own shit sometimes and realizing that, if you lack self-love, which is something that's so common for people right now, if you lack self-love and you don't understand why your relationships are failing, I can't heal your heart, if you don't put that same daily effort into gratitude and self-love and monitoring your narrative and you know what I mean? Like, what is your self-talk and getting those voices out of your head that you listened to for so long that have told you negative things about yourself, and you have to put the work in. And then what I do can help grease the skids, but you've got to also, you can't walk out of the session with me and expect that you're going to step onto the sidewalk and ta-da, I have self-love. No.
Exactly. It's like I can provide the energy of the reset, but you guys take that energy and run with it.
Have to keep it going. Yeah.
Exactly. I agree, but it's also delving into the world of psychology and pathologies, and also also dual diagnosis. And I get where you're coming from, and it is important. But if someone is suffering from the disease of addiction, then go to a healer and ask for the proper amount of energy. And it has to, you have to really be careful. There's someone with the name of Yefim Shubensov. He's known as the Mad Russian in Massachusetts. And you can look him up, Google him, or he's on YouTube. And he works with energy, and he helps people stop with smoking or alcoholism. And he gives an amazing description about energy work and healing work, and from his perspective, his mindset, quite a powerful human being. So it builds on what you're talking about, Sonia and Jennifer, and it's true. It takes two, but I think that it's a lot more complex, and it becomes when we delve into that world of disorders and the world of psychology and the disease of addiction, I think it needs to be really worked with great responsibility.
Absolutely. And it takes multiple modalities. I should not be the only person they're talking to. That's the other piece of it too.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah. It needs to be definitely a mixture. It should be holistic, well-rounded. It should be someone that works with perhaps a life coach, a Reiki master, but definitely psychiatrist, psychologist, medical doctor, whatever it takes. That's my belief.
Absolutely.
How I feel about it. I think it's again, it comes to that important part of living in a post-enlightened society where we need to work our way through all of the crazy social injustice and stigmas in order for someone to actually say, this is what I'm suffering from, and not be held under that stigma, and then be embraced by the medical society and the metaphysical society, both in tandem.
Absolutely. Culture and society is such a hurdle, and how it teaches us to think certain things about ourselves, and a lot of it just doesn't help, and it's a very delicate thing to have to navigate.
I'd like to just give everyone a resource that, because we keep talking about like magic taking the path of least resistance, and for anyone who isn't practicing or is still like researching or curious, I think a really great starting point for that, to be honest, in my opinion, is chaos magic and chaos theory, and books that encompass that are going to give you the quickest way to do that in almost the most safest manner. I mean, I know chaos theory is like so all-encompassing, like it could go really, really far, but when you're just starting to learn, it's actually a really good foundational base for spell work in general.
It's a very difficult, complex topic for a lot of people, and it is a great place to start. It really is, because it gives an amazing understanding of existentialism, of where is Genesis coming from. It's not really, chaos magic is not about chaos as much as it is about understanding alchemy, and it's very deep to delve into, but that's enlightening. It's a good place for people to start. I like that. I wonder how many people are actually starting there without knowing it. They should Google it and understand it, and and I'm careful when I say Google it. I Google it and then see who the authors are. They give a very in-depth, good view and are experts in chaos magic.
I always say Google with discernment.
Google with discernment. There you go.
Yes.
That's for sure. Got it. Yeah. We're in a world where it's all social media. I mean, Temperance, you're the social influencer. Where do you see that going as far as the witchcraft community? Where do you see it heading? Because there's TikTok and there's baby witches. They're cursing the moon, and I don't know how you do it. It's got to be frustrating. But where do you see that heading?
I love to see that for them. But to be honest, if you're on the world of witchcraft online, you'll know this to be an absolutely true statement, is that it is 100% directed by an algorithm, and 0% directed by actual practitioners. So whatever is popular gets popular, and we all have to adjust. And what's popular on TikTok is usually trash. No, it just usually is. And that's not to say the content creators are bad, but I don't think, in my opinion, you can shove spirituality into 60 seconds or less. And the way the algorithm works, it's like the most popular videos, like get the most amount of likes or interactions with a certain amount of time. So usually, like, think about the things that can get the most amount of interactions in a very small amount of time. Either it's funny or it's full of wrong information, because if it's full of wrong information, it's going to have comments being like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, that's going to get pushed by the algorithm anyways, and tons of people are going to see it. So when we're talking about witchcraft online, it's a really messy topic, and especially depending on what platform you're on, because Instagram is slightly different. Like, witches have a little bit more control over what's going on on Instagram. But TikTok, there's no control. The algorithm is completely random. There's little control on Facebook, a little bit more because Instagram and Facebook is the same one. Twitter is, I think, the best platform because it's all words, and you'll basically only see things from people that you follow or people that they follow because of the way that works. I think, to be honest, like if you started because you ran into something online, awesome, but leave it at that. Like move into books, move into groups, move into talking to people. That's going to be where you're going to have the bulk of your information. Like the internet is entertaining and it should be left at entertainment value.
Mm.
Very true.
Advice. Interesting. I don't think we can talk about witchcraft without talking about social media at this point. They seem to be overlapping, and it seems to be the way people are reaching out to one another. So yeah, I think it's a hot topic. It's important. That's some good advice. But I also think it could be something amazing and something wonderful. And I think YouTube has some good lineups with professional authors and psychics and witches that actually have something good to say and interesting. You can actually learn from them.
Yeah.
As to Instagram as well. It's a great platform. It just, I think you do need discernment.
Yeah, I think having been a solitary witch my entire life, the ability to join groups and such in communities on any social media platform is really great, because then you can take it or leave it. But it has always been, growing up, very hard to you either physically join a coven or you don't. And I've just always found historically that's a solitary path is the better way, because it's just such an individual journey. But it is great to have social media to be able to even have these conversations, but to be able to join groups of like-minded individuals and take it or leave it. It's an option that we didn't have in the past.
Plus, it brings its own drama, though. I mean, it's great for networking, it's great for community building, but it's not without its faults. I think,
like I said, take it or leave it, right? It's your choice.
How do you know?
And I like kind of what Lauren said about YouTube. There's some great opportunities there because, as you said, Temperance, some of the algorithms, there's no way to break through some of that. And unless you find some way to add Wicca into your stupid cat video for TikTok, there's no way to really get your point across. But you can, YouTube has been useful for me for things like TED Talks. And, we were talking about green witchery and things like that. Man, I've watched, I don't know how many TED Talks on the communication pathways of fungi. I'm watching talks about mushrooms and not taking in a medicinal sense, but, from just the way they function and communicate and trees and, what I mean? Just all the cool stuff you can learn by listening to these amazing experts in their fields that you now have access to, we didn't necessarily have access to prior. I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have YouTube, when, you couldn't just pull up a TED Talk on, fairy rings and listen to that while you're driving home. And now we can. So,
or even how to pronounce something.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. It's like if you read it in a book, you've got your own terminology until you hear someone else say it sometimes.
Right. It's like athame. Oh.
Yeah.
It's a good resource. It can be used as a good resource. I think it is being used as a good resource. And that's what I've tried to do with social media. Through my e-zine, The Familiar, I do make it free for everyone. I remember when I was starting at Ground Zero here in Florida, and I really just put blood, sweat, and tears into what I love, which is my practices, psychic and counseling and writing and creating my store, my new age store. And I just remember at one point thinking, my God, what if I didn't have money for this. And at one point I did not have money. I was working really, really hard. And I thought, God, I can't even read this. What about people that were really, they're thirsting for spirituality, and they're coming into my store, and they are looking for some kind of message they're seeking. So I promised myself at one point that I would do something, if I ever could, if I was ever able, and I focused on rituals and on spell work, and I did reach a certain level of success, and I'm very grateful. And I am able and have opened up this magazine that I'm so proud of, and it's free, and it is available to so many people through social media and through people such as the people on this panel, Wendy, Temperance, through people that actually believe in it and want to help others and get the word out. So I see wonderful things and wonderful progress being made through the use of social media, as well as what you said, Jennifer. You had said, it's like take it or leave it. I think people sometimes don't know how or when they should take it or leave it. But it was so good that you brought that up, because we have the ability to help people, and people watching this panel, they're interested and they're curious in witchcraft and what it means to be a witch. So there is something free for them to go and read, and it has authors in it, professional authors, and also people that are good writers that live the life of a witch, or what they consider to be the life of a magical practitioner. They may not be a professional author, but doesn't mean they won't be 1-2 years from now. And they're also in my zine. And I've learned by giving back to the community that social media is something wonderful, and it can be used or abused. And that's why I feel such a responsibility in saying that. And that, and shop small. That's the other thing I always tell people in any panel. But that's how I feel. I mean, what is the social media? How do you, I don't know, Temperance, how do you choose? How do you tell someone, take it or leave it? How do you explain that to someone that is a newbie? Or, because Jennifer brought up a really good, that's really important. How do you say take it or leave it? And I keep turning to you, because I know your platform is huge.
Yeah, I think for anyone, because I know my introduction cut out, so people may not know me. If you're watching this, you may not know who I am. I run Wild Woman Witchcraft on Instagram, and I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok. I mean, I'm on all of it, so that's why I'm a little bit disenfranchised by the concept of social media. But growing my platform and then watching other content creators, I think when you run into someone's content, it's not about the quality of the video, because anyone can make a really good looking video, right? So that's automatically not the thing that you're looking for. You want to listen to the person's words, not what they're doing, not what they're wearing, but what they're actually saying. Do their words make sense? And do they align with your values or what you believe? Read the comments, see how people are reacting to the video. If there's what appears to be stan culture about the video, people are just hyping up the creator versus discussing the post's content, that's always a red flag for me. But I think discernment comes with just viewing. The more you see it, the more you'll recognize what's real and what's not. And if you're introduced to something new in a video, let's just pretend that I've never seen the word, someone said it earlier, athame, right? Or athame, or however you're going to say it. I've only ever read it. I've never seen it. And then I watch a video and someone has said it differently than how I've read it in my brain. And I'm like, wait, is that how that word is said? You can automatically go to Google and just Google how to say blank word. And it's going to tell you and be like, oh, okay. So that's a really easy example. But you can do that with people. I know it's really popular on TikTok right now, Moldavite. And it's caused a Moldavite craze, like what we saw in the late 90s. and actually probably more so now. And, you know, kids are going crazy about Moldavite on the internet. So it's like, okay, if you run across a content creator talking about Moldavite and all they're saying is like, Moldavite's ruining my life, you could automatically know, okay, like first off, it's probably not, so I'm going to keep skipping. And you're looking for content that teaches you something that's educational. So if someone brings up Moldavite, I want to hear about how it's a tektite. I want to hear about how it formed. I want to hear about what it could do, like vibrationally. Those are things that you're looking for. You're not looking for like, I bought this Moldavite chunk and like now I'm having nightmares. Like, you want to really be discernful with like the content that you allow into your space is feeding you in some sort of way. If it doesn't feed you, then it shouldn't be content that you continue to watch. It's my opinion.
Yeah, I wanted to articulate this, but I didn't quite know what the example would be. And I think you illustrated it right there. A lot of this content is fear-based. Like, I bought Moldavite and now I'm having nightmares. And that triggers this fear response. And then everyone feels like, wow, I'm afraid. And now I need to spread this information. Like, you might be making ghost water during the blue moon. Oh my goodness, you know, and that sort of thing. And a lot of it is very much fear-based. It's also scrambling to be the source of information. And I think that you can, when you take a step back and you breathe for a second, you can start to identify what the motivation is behind that information. And it might be alarming at first, but go ahead and like do your own research from a different source and see if that's right for you or not.
Right. So I'm pivoting for a moment. Thank you. That was really interesting. But I have to get this in before the end of our 2 hours. So I identify as a witch, a gay witch. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me, bravo, that's wonderful, and that's great. And then I can't tell you how many people have said to me, well, you're a man, you're male.
You're a man witch.
Because of your gender, you are not allowed to call yourself a witch.
Aren't you a warlock?
Warlock. But then the problem is,
yes.
so
you're a wizard,
what does
Harry.
Warlock mean? You know, so many people have, you know, then someone will tell you, well, warlock means oath breaker as of I don't know, 990 or 1000 CE in Old English. But even that is, you know, it morphed as time went on. But you know, it's yeah. I see Devin like shaking his head. It's like, I feel the same. It's like, it doesn't mean that, yet it does. Yet I would love to hear what the panel thinks of this, because I just believe that anyone can call themselves a witch. So if someone has an issue with me calling myself a warlock or a witch, I have a lot I want to say to them, but I'm sure that others on the panel would like to have a go at it.
Super quick.
Younger generation.
Super quick, the shoulds and shouldn't. I think it comes from a sense of needing that outside confirmation and validation. And then once someone feels they find it, they have to reinforce it in others. Like, this is what you need to do. This is what, because that's the comfort that they found in that outside validation. When really that's just them expressing themselves as you should or you shouldn't, or you are this or you are not, because that is what they have found for themselves. So they're really kind of projecting there, and it's an easy trap to fall into.
Devin, what do you have?
I think you get to call yourself whatever the hell you want to call yourself, and I don't think anybody gets to have an opinion on it, just period. And that may be my super queerness coming out of being a guy who's had to fight a bunch of these kind of battles. I mean, I was about 11 years, well, let's see here. So 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, I was being, we had some of the Dianic Wiccan priestesses trying to sue me for having a temple dedicated to the goddess Diana and doing public rituals. And they were trying to say that somehow I was taking money from them. And this went on, and they spun their wheels, and they lost, of course, because there was no grounding there. And it all got down to, I was a dude doing it, where there were 14 other groups that actually had the name and was using the name, were making money off of the name Temple of Diana in some way. And we weren't. And it all just got down to, I was a dude with a beard and I had a penis, and that was unacceptable to them. And so my introduction into the wider pagan world was just crap. and it was just full of hatred and transphobia. I'm not a trans person, but I take, as a queer person and a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I take offense to anybody who has an offense to who we are. As I'm not going to validate my existence to you. Here I am, just look. And so for me, you know, I ended up with a guy who calls himself Warlock. My partner is Storm Fairwolf, one of my partners in polyamorous. His name is Storm Fairwolf. He's another author, has books out there. He is a proud self-proclaimed warlock, and his reasoning for it is beautiful and brilliant. And that is that, no, that's what he grew up with. He grew up seeing warlocks on TV were male witches, and that's just how it was. And he didn't know that people were going to have a problem with it until he got involved with the greater community, and people were like, oh, don't you actually know that it means this? And that's not true. There's no evidence of that. And if you go to Scotland, they refer to male witches as warlocks to this day, and in parts of Germany. And so we can sit here and have like these arguments, but it's the same thing arguing over the term witch. Like, it means something different to different people. It means that I like to refer to myself as a sorcerer. If we really get into it, if we really want to like start nitpicking around, well, I'm more of a sorcerer. I work more with spirits. That's how my craft works. But you know, I'm a witch. I say modern witch, but I don't care what you call yourself, as long as at the end of the day, it's like, I'm a good citizen. My rights end where yours begin. And I don't care what you're doing. I don't need to know what you're doing in your bedroom. I don't need to know what you're doing on your altar, as long as you're happy. And if you come to me and ask me for a question or ask me my opinion, I'll give it to you. But I don't make it a habit of judging people off of their self-chosen labels. Because I think that, especially as a witch, one of the greatest and most powerful things that we can do is claim ourselves. And that includes our identity, that includes the way that we see ourselves. So that's my spiel. You know, I call yourself whatever the hell you want to call yourself. If you're a magical person, you're cool with me.
Fortunately, in this country and all over the world, we do have a history of doing this sort of gatekeeping in language and in practice and culture. So for instance, in the 1700s in the US, it was really popular for when rich people were being buried to have the death's head symbol on it, which was a skull with some like wings coming out of the skull. And then pretty soon, the good old peasants were like, hey, that looks pretty sweet. I want that on my tombstone. And the rich people went, ooh, no, you can't have your death represented that way. So we'll just go with angels or cherubs, and we'll move away from the death's head symbol. So there's always going to be this evolution of definitions and word usage, but there's always going to be the gatekeepers too that are going to say, no, you are this, you can't be this. And it's really unfortunate because, as everyone's mentioned, the definitions are so broad and they are more of self-identifiers rather than a community identifier.
We love labels though, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
you know,
human.
which is a really gender neutral term. And honestly, the only time I see this topic come up is when the other person has never studied history. And that's just the honest truth, because if you've studied history, a lot of the arguments, like especially the ones that I see online, are like, witches are women. Well, witch is a gender neutral term. And then they'll correctly be like, oh, especially like I see this in my comment section all the time, where a guy will be like, oh, I'm a witch. And someone will be like, don't you mean Moral? Could be like, no, I'm a witch. But then the conversation will be like, oh, well, like only women are witches, and here's why, blah, 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 blah. Well, lots and lots of men were killed as witches during the trials. And, you know, we know today that, and it's completely revisionist history, like witches weren't killed, like normal people were killed. Like it wasn't witches that were killed, it was normal people. And a lot of them happened to be landowners, and landowners were men. So lots of men were killed as witches. And I think it's just completely revisionist and turfy to exclude men from the term witch, because they have just as much of a right to use it, in my opinion.
It's just making something to fit your own agenda.
Right.
Well, I'd like to even go further back than that, to back when witches were, you know, the wise women, or the wise individual more so, but that the church was threatened by that power and had to denounce them and undermine all their power. And I think that might be where a little bit of the gender equalization went there, or disinformation, I guess. But I don't know, maybe.
I think that's fair because
Yeah.
we're looking at a history where women have been demonized and vilified for anything from having a craving to wanting to be on top, right? So like at the end of the day, we have to deal with the fact that we are dealing with a word that has historically been associated with female suffrage and female oppression. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, accept that, love that, incorporate that into our practices and these types of discussions, but also make it clear, as we're talking about, there's that internal identifier, then there's the external identifier. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to walk both worlds. But we have to remember that there's at least two worlds, right?
Yes. Yep.
Just
And you know, you can call me a witch with a B.
Uncle Arthur. Sorry, Wendy. I was just saying my favorite warlock is Uncle Arthur from Magick. Does anyone remember him?
Yes.
Go ahead. You were saying your favorite witch is the one that begins with a B?
Well, no, you can call me a witch with a B, and it's not going to affect me. I can be. If you want to put the moniker on me, I will live up to it for you. But I'll own whatever I feel in my heart. I'm not afraid to be me.
And you shouldn't.
Right.
So I was wondering if anybody wanted to take, I mean, I think we're almost running out of time, but if we wanted to talk about, speaking of terminology and practice, the topic of witchcraft versus and Wicca. So sort of the differentiation for those, because it sounds like there's a lot of people listening in that are relatively new to the craft or starting to be seekers or exploring it, really helping to differentiate between what is witchcraft, what is Wicca, because so much of what is in print and available muddies the waters, at least for introductory purposes. Of there's sort of, at least in a lot of what I'm hearing or seeing, that you have to kind of follow this Wiccan thing to get into that witch thing, versus, you know, you can follow witchcraft separately. You can be a practicing witch separate from the religious dogma. And so I'm wondering if someone wants to sort of take that topic and talk about it a little bit.
Well, I think I'll just go ahead and jump in, and I'm sure people, please, this is a loaded thing. But I think we can, as Temperance was saying, everybody needs to kind of learn history a little bit, and we need to understand where things are coming from, and especially when it comes to Wicca. Wicca is very Western, so you know, it's all the information's there. It's something that we can hunt down. Ronald Hutton was great because he writes about kind of the story of how Wicca came about, and essentially Wicca itself is a tradition within witchcraft. We can kind of refer to it as that. So think of, there's Baptists and evangelicals, but everyone's a Christian. And so we kind of look at Wicca like that. However, there was also a push in the 80s, 90s, and early parts of the 2000s to do a little bit of, well, it actually started in the 60s, but we really see it in pop culture in the 80s and 90s, but to kind of whitewash witchcraft so it was more digestible. And there's reasons for this. First is that witches are scary, and how do we make them not scary? Well, we put some rules out there. First one is they can't hurt anybody, right? There's this threefold law thing that didn't exist until there was this movement to make witches less scary. There we can say, I mean, we see this from folk practices. No folk practices have a threefold law. That was an invention for Wiccans who wanted to adhere to that faith and that style of magic. And so there's a bunch of things like that kind of happened. And it was, and I think the easiest thing we can say is people took aspects of Wicca and then tried to make them as broadly accepted as they possibly could. And one of those big things was to say we're Wiccans and not witches. And so if you grew up, if you at all saw television in the 90s and there was a witch character, they always had a scene where they said, no, I'm a Wiccan, not a witch. And it would be like this whole thing. And that was what a lot of us kind of grew up with as far as a cultural aspect, where people trying to say, no, we're not witches, we're Wiccans. And, you know, there's a reason for this. But if we really break into it, it comes from a tradition that actually is a real tradition. There are many traditions of Wicca, actually, if you really want to get into it. And not all of them would call themselves witches, which I think is a fun thing. But from a classical kind of traditional standpoint, Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans. And so we kind of look at it like that. Yeah.
I say that frequently and people are confused by that. So I appreciate, adding color. It's good.
I think a TLDR on it is that Wicca is a religion and witchcraft is a practice. So witchcraft itself is secular. It can be added to anything. Wicca is specifically referring to a religion created by Gerald Gardner. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Wicca. But I think the lines do get blurred, like Devin was saying, was that Wicca has influenced a lot of modern magic. And then you go back even further and you're talking about Golden Dawn and like Hermeticism and stuff like that. But like Western magic, a lot of Western witchcraft has been touched in some way by Wicca. That's just the honest truth. It kind of weeded its way through everything. Sometimes you have to like separate out, like, because when a lot of people fall into witchcraft or they want to start like going through paganism, a lot of people take the pit stop first in Wicca and they're like, oh, this isn't the right fit. And then they move on into the broader umbrella of witchcraft and paganism. But those people retain some things they learned from Wicca, and it has kind of come through everything. But in a nutshell, Wicca, religion, witchcraft, secular practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's also... Oh, sorry. So it's been so hugely impressed. Like all of paganism really owes a lot to Wicca. Actually, I mean, people get down on Wiccans, and you see that stuff on the forums a lot. No Wicca, but a lot of paganism owes much cred to those early Wiccans who were writing and putting things out there and making sure that everybody knew that people existed who weren't of an Abrahamic faith within Western culture. So, let's also just give Wicca its props, because a lot of us are here because there was a Wiccan before us.
And just being introduced to the elements as well. We can go off onto another path a little. It's anything that introduces you to the elements and to a connection to Mother Earth and to nature helps you understand yourself. We're made of air, water, fire, earth, and spirit. So we have an automatic connection to Mother Earth, and we've been so cut off from Mother Earth, so cut off. And again, with what we're going through between the pandemic and the election and the polarization of our nation and also the world that we live in, there's so much that is trying to disconnect us. And that's why remaining responsible and taking care of ourselves and taking care of Mother Earth is becoming more and more important. So Wicca has introduced us to the elements as well. And so yeah, let's give credit where credit's due. And also let's remember Mother Earth as we move forward. And if we're going to talk about witchcraft and spirituality, we have to talk about the planet that we live on that allows us to freely practice what we believe in and what we choose to explore, at least here in the United States of America. So we need to give reverence to Mother Earth and allow the connection to the elements to help us sustain her and the environment. I believe that there are going to be more workers that are helping the global environment than we've ever seen before. So I feel like we're headed in the right direction, and I'm so keeping my fingers crossed because global warming is real, and we need to take care of the mess that has been made. So yeah, anything that can connect us to Mother Earth and help us understand ourselves and others better, I'm all for.
That's great.
If we don't work with the earth will move on without us.
Yes.
Yes.
One way or another, right?
Possibly start over completely.
Yeah.
Yep. Scrap it.
We are fleas on a dog. I frequently say that.
It takes two volcanoes. Two volcanoes will do us.
Yeah.
Well,
Patricia,
good night.
You've been, yeah, right. On that note, Patricia, you've been in practicing for a very long time. Do you have a different perspective, or Or did you share that, the feeling? Or did we lose her?
Patricia, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, there she is. I wasn't sure if you had a different opinion or not, because I know you've been practicing a very long time.
Yeah. You mean on the aspects of Wicca and witchcraft?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe that Wicca is the spiritual aspect and witchcraft is the magical aspect of what we do.
That's great. Yeah,
I kind of thought they were one and the
same,
but okay. Oh, sorry, Sonia.
Yeah. No. That's what I was going to say, that it comes up a lot, and it can be a very polarizing conversation for a lot of people too. Devin kind of mentioned it. I say it too. It's, all Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans is sort of a simplified way sometimes of trying to explain it. But, that there's a spiritual aspect, and then there's the practice of. There's the in some respects, it seems for a lot of people, there's the dogma versus the fundamental practice of. So it seems that's pretty similar, if I can loosely paraphrase a lot of the feedback.
Well, yeah, I believe that the Wiccan aspect gives you a moral compass. Mm-hmm. And especially for those starting out, they need.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
Nope.
We lost her.
Oh, no. She was on a roll.
Yeah,
she was on a roll, and she's gone.
Well, excuse me. Dominic is asking, what's the difference between spiritual and magical? I guess, like we were saying, it. I always kind of thought they were pretty much intertwined myself, but
I've always found the conversation to be, what's the difference between being religious and spiritual?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Spiritual and magical, I think that there's a definite overlap. Someone who is spiritual may or may not be magical. Someone who is magical may or may not be spiritual, but there's definitely some kind of overlap that takes place. And again, it comes down to a definition. What's your definition of spirituality? What's your definition of magical? Great question, curious, but I consider myself spiritual and magical. I consider myself spiritual because I wish well for others, and so that's my definition of spirituality. It's much deeper, a real definition, but I like to keep it simple when it comes to spirituality. And magical, what defines a magical person? I've met people that they're complete atheists and they are magical. They have an amazing wit, they're clever, they're charismatic, and there's something magical about them. So once again, it comes down to the definition. And then a magical person, with or without the K, however you choose, that is a practitioner of the arts. I don't think that you can really become a magician or a witch or a practitioner of the arts without somehow wading in the waters of spirituality. At one point, it becomes something that you have to encounter. And again, it's a personal definition.
Mm-hmm. I've always found that the term magic encompasses anything that you just cannot define or expect by reason. It is something outside of the compass of even science. But I think that magic is just when science hasn't caught up yet to where we are in understanding. And when I said, I see a bigger difference in religious versus spirituality, to me, I'm very spiritual. I'm not very religious because I am a solo practitioner. And to me, religion, when you're religious, you abide and agree and join a very constructed set of spirituality, and it defines what you believe and how you live and how you live your life. So all these things are sort of intertwined together, and it's just a matter of what feels right to you. But being Wiccan, it's structured. It is a religion. So if you feel like you need that and you need that guidance and you want to adhere to that, great. If you don't, well, then maybe you're more spiritual and it's more of a personal path, but you're still connected to that. And to be magical, it's kind of outside all of that. To magical to me is, I can't define it. I have no rules for it. I can't predict it. It just happens, and it should be respected, and it's powerful, and it's amazing and wondrous. And if you can, find what's right for you and figure out where you fit in all those Venn diagram of things.
We are human, but we are also spirit, and we yearn for purpose. We yearn for spiritual fulfillment. We are people that want to walk outside and see the beauty, look up at the moonlight and let the starlight trickle into our mind's eye. What makes us someone who yearns for spirituality? We have to have spirit within us. We're more than just an automaton. And it's past the midnight hour, so good night, everyone. And thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everyone on the panel. So appreciate all of you and everyone watching. I'm going to sign off. Good night. Much
Thank
love.
you for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Lauren.
And
Thanks, Lauren.
Wonderful to see you again.
Yes, nice seeing everyone. Temperance, see you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Would someone like to field the question of what a kitchen witch is?
I'll take it, just because someone on Amazon commented that my book is full of bread recipes, which it's not. I have like 3 of them. I think that kitchen witchcraft is basically someone that makes magic in the kitchen. Essentially, what you can do is a kitchen witch, instead of like a green witch, for example, would use plants, a kitchen witch uses food, uses drink, and they make magic through those tangible items. So it's something that you can make to nourish yourself, to nourish an altar, to nourish other people. But I think if anyone's watched Sabrina, like the new reboot of Sabrina, like
Scary one?
No, the one of the aunts.
Yeah. I know which
right?
aunt you're talking. Yeah.
She's the quintessential kitchen witch. She's always cooking, always baking. Like your grandmother that made cookies for 3 weeks straight during Christmas season. Kitchen witchcraft. I mean, like it's really, it's not a complicated thing. Some of the easiest ways to do it, honestly, are a crock pot, because they brew all day long and you can add herbs throughout the day. I think honestly, I think crock pots are like the biggest tip I could ever give to a kitchen witch, because you can, if you start cooking something in the morning, you can use planetary hours to add certain spices and ingredients as it's cooking, which is something that I had to learn on my own. And it's like a really big tip. But kitchen witchcraft is basically just like a witch using their ability to cook and create a tangible form of magic.
Absolutely. How many people pour love into what they make, right? And I think that one of the more powerful, and this is just me thinking, you're free to like make your own judgment, is one of the, ingesting something is one of the more powerful, irreversible spells that you can do, because your body is completely absorbing it on a cellular level. So kitchen witchery to me is the recipe is the spell. Your intention is part of your craft and what you're baking or cooking, and then you're serving it to people who are very close to you because they're eating your food. You know, you can easily see how magic is woven into that.
Absolutely.
Although for those of us listening, we have adjusted our recipe slightly to make sure that we are respectful to all animals and creatures, and we no longer use tongue of dog.
No.
The eye of newt.
Exactly.
No animals are
that's
harmed in the making of our recipe.
I have newt. I use mustard seed.
Well, there you go. Yeah. There's some substitutions that can be made, and the intention still stays.
Well, there were a few things in that song spell that I had no idea what on earth they might be, and may not even be anything in this day and age.
Right.
It's a little controversial about what was it code for. Like wool of bat, is that holly or mistletoe, that sort of thing. And tongue of dog is actually, a plant that looks like a tongue of dog.
Okay.
Yeah, and tongue of.
Wasn't it Shakespeare? Wasn't it a Shakespearean poem? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually recently, in October, I did a series of videos. I created a witchy YouTube channel this year, and that was one of the topics I covered: famous witch ingredients and
cool.
what they could mean. Eye of newt, tongue of dog, all of that. And I do find it interesting, but it is also historically hard to trace. But when you look at the elements, it's like, oh, I can absolutely see that. So there is a little bit of self-validation there.
Chandler's saying that toe of frog is buttercup. So
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Macbeth
can predict if you like butter or not by holding it under your chin.
If it does not collect any, you do. Yeah.
I love it. I think that's a good reminder to keep our playfulness, right? It's not all serious. It's very much the spirit of loving what we do and just celebrating it and being lighthearted about it too. It's very important.
Oh, you have to have humor. I at Samhain I was casting Circle, and I had written out, because I'm a little more elaborate at Samhain, so of course I wrote it out and I was reading it. I had not memorized it, so there's that age-old joke of, are you a bad witch? Well, yes, I don't memorize my rituals. So as I'm walking, I realized I had a typo. Instead of weaving threads into stronger twine, it said stronger wine, and I'm like, yeah, that too. And that. I do need stronger wine. So yeah, you have to have and I think that's part of it too. That's so important to people who's starting out. You're gonna make mistakes, and they're not even really necessarily mistakes. But you're gonna make mistakes, and it's humor is so important in life and in practice and in spirituality. You have to be able to laugh. I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay. And those moments of levity are so important. Don't take any of it too serious. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't beat yourself up. It's everybody does it. It happens all the time. And so it is definitely a good reminder to keep the humor. I frequently, if I'm holding a public circle and I invite others, and they might bring a family or friend that's curious, and so I kind of do a simple ritual that's a little more public. We always joke. I said, anybody here a virgin? And it's like, awesome, you brought the sacrifice. Thank you. So you gotta laugh about it sometimes and be like, it's okay. It's gonna be all right. Yeah, it's gonna be all right. We don't sacrifice anybody, not in the last 5 years at least. Virgin, so you're fine. It's
Life is messy. We are messy. We're not perfect. We will never be perfect. I think that the whole reason of having a book of shadows is because I can't possibly remember everything. I need to write it down. It's not about being a walking encyclopedia. It's about celebrating everything and being a part of it. We're not perfect.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, I had kind of wanted to get Devin's opinion on the social media, since you are so you are on several platforms, have several websites, do a podcast, and I believe a video cast as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, I Temperance hit it out, and I will say, when it comes to social media, Temperance is who I bow to. And so like I took a class from her actually. So I totally recommend if you get a chance to take a class from Temperance, take a class from Temperance. I've had a show for going on 11 years now, and I'm going to toot my own horn here because we just had the revelation the other day that I'm the only Witchcraft podcast that's been recommended by both the AV Club and Cosmo Magazine. And so it's been this kind of journey to, when I started back in the day, when I started the podcast, it was a way for me to get a hold of other people and just kind of reach out and try to, as we keep using the term like-minded individuals, this was the term that we used a lot in the 90s and early part of the 2000s when we were meeting other pagans and witches. You'd see that term a lot. And that's what, so that's what I was trying to do. And I was lucky enough to have a career where I was traveling a lot and going to a lot of pagan festivals and meeting just the coolest people who were presenters or musicians there. And so I wanted to, take those conversations that I was having with people at night around a campfire and put them on air. And that's how the show started. And I had no intention of it becoming this thing that it became. And so Modern Witch over the years has gone through, and I'm kind of jaded, like, Temperance is saying, because she's at top right now with all of the social media accounts. She knows what it looks like. And so it's not so pretty, necessarily all the time. And I went through that for a couple of years where, you just work so hard, you put all this stuff out there, and then you start to realize one of the really interesting things for me was that I had gone kind of down a traditional path, as we say, with meeting people and networking and going to the gigs and the festivals and all that stuff. But then, there are people like Temperance who didn't do that, and they created their own networks and their own groups of people. And so for me, it was this kind of realization that I was going down this really traditional road. And then I looked around and the internet had grew around me, and it grew, around Modern Witch. And I was so thankful to realize that because I had the podcast, I was able to kind of take flight with it, and just kind of take off. But I'm not a millennial who's naturally prone to working with social media. Temperance gets texts from me probably, once or twice a week saying, how do I do this? Why doesn't this make sense? So it's, just kind of one of those things where the internet's growing. And I just did an episode over the summer about it, where I talked to, what's his name? John. My brain has totally stalled on me. Go check it out. It's, but we talk about the difference between pagans and witches, and we get into this topic where we're talking about the subject or the concept that we've had a lot of speciesization happening within the pagan and occult worlds, where we see people hanging out with just their friends and not really being exposed to other things. And so we get these little microcultures, and that happens when you have a culture that grows to a certain point. You start to do that where suddenly, there's so many variations, there's so many different ways of practicing, and you want to hang out with your people. But I think for all of the good that's done for us, I think it's also kind of caused a lot of problems with gatekeeping, and it's caused a lot of problems with misinformation, and so you get these echo chambers. Like TikTok is an echo chamber. And so it's a lot, it's mostly people talking about the same thing, giving the same bad advice, giving the same misinformation that they could figure out with a Google search, on their own, but because it's there and it's in their face, it's what it is. So we have the problem where those of us who, and I don't want to sound like a snob, this is probably the snobbiest I'll sound all night, so forgive me, but those of us who are trying to be taken seriously, we run into this where, it's a lot of, I just closed, we had a shop for 30 years. We just closed it because of COVID. But we'd get a lot of people coming in who had seen a TikTok video, and were asking questions about why certain things happened the way that they did. And we're like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense. Somebody coming in saying that they read an article about how they needed to have a special type of wand, and they knew they could come to my store and buy the wand. And I'm like, no, you go make that. Like, this is a thing. So there's just so much misinformation out there, and there's all of these little echo chambers. And it's the same problem everywhere culturally. We're doing this. This is, Republicans and Democrats, echo chambers, So we have this stuff everywhere, and it's reflected in our spiritual communities and our pagan and occult communities. And I think it's really important to recognize that you got to take a step out of it sometimes. Like my partner was talking about some of the stuff he was dealing with a group that he was part of. This is years ago. And his friend looked at him and said, you do realize that you're like in a cult, right? And it wasn't that he was really in a cult, but the way that we tend to treat each other, the way that we tend to just gang up, and we have these ideals, and we just get it becomes culty. you know, and you don't see it until you take a step out and you realize, oh, normal people don't treat each other like that. Like normal people aren't calling each other this. And this isn't something that we've accepted elsewhere. Why would we accept this in our pagan witchcraft community? So I think we need to do a lot of rewriting our values just personally, and our standards. You know, it's something that really busts my chaps when people just tend to talk before they think, or respond to something out of fear. As you were saying, Jennifer, a lot of this is fear-based. Temperance had talked about that. And that only serves one person, right? And it's usually the person who's trying to impose the fear. And so that's that stuff. When it comes to social media and it comes to the internet, that's the stuff I worry about the most. Facebook really scares me. I know we're broadcasting on Facebook, but I was very active on Facebook for a very long time, you know, since it took over from MySpace, I've been on Facebook. And just with like this last couple of years, I had to take a step back and really ask myself, like, as a magical person, does this company actually represent what I want for myself? And, you know, just weird things that you never thought you'd ask, because before, back in the days of MySpace, it was just about who had the prettiest GIF and how did you put music, you know, on your background, your profile. So it was very different. Social media meant something that it doesn't mean, you know, 10 years ago, it meant something that it doesn't mean now. 20 years ago, it meant something different. And I think that as we're all evolving, we have to really take all of these different angles into consideration. And that's a really hard thing to do when it's in your face every day, all day long. Yeah.
I think social media just very much magnifies the human condition of everything that society is imposing on you, what you're imposing on yourself because of society. And if we're not careful, it just makes it worse. And I would just say that we are so much bigger than what we perceive ourselves to be as a human being right now, right here. And social media can be just such a noise to distract you from that understanding. And all this outside you shouldn't, and this external validation, and you're seeking of internal validation. And it can be a great tool to connect, but it can also be a terrible hammer to disconnect you from even yourself. So just be aware of that and use it accordingly to what you need, because it can be a dangerous space. It can be wondrous and it can be dangerous. It's like they say with a hammer, you can create or you can destroy with it. It depends on how you use the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's honestly, that sums up the entire practice of witchcraft as well.
Yeah.
Just how you use the tool. It's your intent, it's discernment. Keep what works, toss what doesn't.
You got to do that inner work.
I don't think a lot of people just think that social media is true gnosis. To be honest, people like go online, and if they see something that someone they like posted, that becomes their version of gnosis towards their spiritual path. And and you know, I was explaining it to someone else the other day, but I think there is a stark difference between offline witches and online witches, because there are occultists and witches, and that's a thing. And you know, like we would say, you know, in the past we would have said armchair witches. Well, now like there's witches, right? And you know, a lot of people are finding their gnosis through the internet, and you have to acknowledge it. What social media, how it's playing a part, and how ultimately humans are not leading that conversation, algorithms are. So it's like,
it's dangerous.
Well, and to that end too, Temperance, because you're totally hitting this on the spot, because I mean, if we want to get really meta about it, like we're watching the birth of a god, right, with the algorithm. And Temperance has been talking about this for a long time on her at least on her Twitter, you know, and
I talk about all the time.
True. Yeah. And it's important to really think about that and to keep that in mind, that like this is a real thing and we're watching this happen, and it isn't, you know, maybe we want to call it a found god or not, but I'm still going to say EO algorithm when I'm trying to, you know, have something take off on the internet or whatever. And it's super true. We also exist too. I want to add this little side note, but we also exist in fandoms. And I think this is a really, really important thing to just kind of consider, that, just as much as you have, you're into your bands and you're into, certain things that just really are so witchcraft works like that too, right? So we have our favorite authors, we have our favorite traditions, and we have our favorite ways of looking at things. And we tend to kind of, congeal together. Congeal's the wrong word. We tend to kind of gather together. Congeal's a weird word to use for that. We tend to gather together with, and just like people who are into a band would gather together. We're going to go see our favorite authors. We're going to go do these certain things. And it's important to kind of realize that just as much as we have our favorite styles and aesthetics, right? Like there are a lot of witches out there who, like on TikTok, they just want a pretty picture. At the end of the day, they just want to fit into the fantasy of the pretty picture. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but we have to know that's what it is. And that alone comes with its own fandom, right? The aesthetic witches are their own thing. And then you've got this really serious, hardcore studied witches who are their other thing, and they don't like the pretty witches. And you get to this whole thing. And I think what we end up finding ourselves understanding as you get more into social media is that as much as you may end up finding yourself naturally going in one direction or the other, the longevity of the discussion, the longevity of your career in social media really relies on you being mutable and pliable and following where those things are coming and where the trends are taking you. And that's, as Temperance has said, nowadays isn't really up to us. Before we could guide the conversation. Now we don't get to guide the conversations. Now we just have to be part of them.
Yeah. And it's like, I haven't, you talked about how I teach classes. One of my newest classes that I've been like playing around with, I've taught it once, so I've kind of like gotten a feel for it, is algorithms as egregores. And a lot of people don't realize that algorithms for witches that work with egregores or thought forms, and like this is like, we're at an advanced stage of this conversation. We're like 2.5 hours in, so at this point I'm throwing out the term egregore and I'm not going to explain it. People who are witches online know how to manipulate these and work with them. And I think when we talk about social media, it's a really, really powerful tool, but there's always something at play there. There's always someone getting something from it. And when you're consuming media, like I tell my partner all the time, like I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear whatever sound clip he's using, like when he's watching TikTok or anything. Like I don't want to hear the sound clips, because that's a section of something that someone's feeding you to serve a purpose. I don't know why they want you to hear it, but they do. And the things that we consume aren't as benign as they appear to be. So especially when we're talking about consuming spirituality and witchcraft content, is definitely like extra things to watch out for in that.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, what it comes down to me, I want to sit in a field and enjoy the sounds and when I'm, the ground underneath me and the beautiful view and perhaps the sunset or the sunrise. And that is what's important to me. I could care less what's going on online, because it's all superficial. It's just a wrapper. And everyone has to find that in themselves. What's your field? Where are you sitting? Is this going to shut off your electricity or not? Is this affecting your life? What are you letting in? What are you putting out? I'll be sitting in my field.
That's lovely.
Well, guys, I guess we probably ought to wrap it up. I'm sorry. It's gone so fast.
Oh my gosh, it has. Look at that. 9:30.
No, right? But thank you all so much for a great talk. If you'd like to promote your books or websites or whatever a little bit before we go, that's great. Jake is gone, or he would be working up an algorithm for us. And
I haven't mentioned one thing. If anything that I've said has resonated with you and you want to connect with me online, I run theforestparlor.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I run online meetups that are completely free to join. And you don't have to consider yourself a witch. If these concepts resonate with you, join me, join others, that sort of thing. I'm also very much an energy healer. if you feel like you need any kind of reset in your life, you need any kind of divination work or guidance, followed by energy work, that is what the Forest Parlor is all about. So I just wish everyone well with their own personal journey, and you know, just round out the rest of the year and look forward, set your goals, you know, shape life the way you want it to be.
Absolutely. All righty. Guys,
yeah, well,
Temperance?
if anyone wants to join the conversation, join the McCormick Coven tradition, you're welcome to, but you have to own kitchen spices. I can be found at wildwoman_witchcraft on Instagram, TikTok. That's my YouTube. I'm Temperance Alden on Twitter. That's my most chaotic platform, so highly don't recommend that one. But on Instagram, that's where all the jokes are and the good content is. So hope to see you guys there.
Wonderful. Devin?
She says that, but the truth is she's way better on Twitter than she is on TikTok. That's my personal opinion.
Inside track.
Check her out on Twitter. Absolutely. I mean, don't not look at her Instagram, but definitely check her out on Twitter. So I'm Devin Hunter. You can check out my book series, the Witch Power series. Book 1 is The Witch's Book of Spirit or Power. Book 2 is The Witch's Book of Spirits, and then book 3 is The Witch's Book of Mysteries. And it is an actual complete book system. So if you want to learn witchcraft and you liked what I said tonight, you can pick up my book series, and it'll take you from the beginning to the end, as far as what you would need to lay things out and figure out what you want out of your craft, using the techniques from my tradition that I talked about, Sacred Fire. So it's in there. It's a best-selling series. I'm very proud to say, and I don't get to say it a lot, so I'm going to say it out as much as I can. And then I also have another book called Modern Witch that is available now. That's all over Barnes & Noble and all the good places right now. So do check it out. It's the only picture book right now for witches. So you should go check it out. And then otherwise you can check out modernwitch.com, and that'll give you access to podcasts, vidcasts, classes, you name it, playlists, like just about everything. We're on there, and I am at Mr. Devin Hunter on all the social medias. So you can check us out there, and I would love to meet new people, and I'm always down for making new friends.
Wonderful. Well, you've made a few here anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Sonia, you good, or what do you think?
Yeah, for me, I'm at Resonance Healing 1. That's my business page. Here I'm just being me, but as far as my healing work goes, and my online social media presence for my healing business, it's at Resonance Healing 1. I also teach classes here and there locally. I'm less present online than perhaps Temperance. It's not my thing so much, but I am there once in a while. And my band is Chronolus, and we just won the Band of the Year through IPMA. So if you're interested in
congratulations!
Thank you. Very excited about that. So we have a big fancy crystal award and everything. It's very cool. So if you want to check out the band, that's Chronolus, and it's CHRONILUS, if I can spell it. That's terrible. But it's late. And it's we're Facebook, whatever, all of them. It's just at Chronolus. So that's me. That's my band and my healing and all that good stuff.
Great. Thank you all for being here tonight. We've got Pete or Bea will be on next Wednesday. Talk about
Pete.
Campbell and
cool.
I was just at the Ghost Conference last week. It was amazing. He did a great job. Yeah, he did great.
It will be. And everybody, get in touch, mysticmooncafe@gmail.com or the website, mysticmooncafe.com or Facebook. And here we are.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm learning on the other platforms, so give me a few minutes. Grandma's old and she takes a few minutes.
I'm slow on it too.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was great to meet everybody.
Bye.
Bye.